And now we're going to cover the trauma module. In the trauma module, we are going to talk about what trauma is, one-time versus reoccurring trauma, how trauma can affect our emotions, body, and mind. We're going to talk about signs of PTSD, and then we're going to cover strategies for coping with trauma and what trauma and me looks like. The intervention part of the module should last about 40 minutes with your team. And the two worksheets here you will want to have printed out prior to beginning the PowerPoint presentation with the team. And I will show you where you'll want to pull these out to work through with the team. Now, I am going to walk you through the PowerPoints for this module that you will be working through with the youth. You will notice that this section has two PowerPoints to work through. Each slide has an audio component. As we go through the slides, there will be times that I will point out places to pause for discussion. Let's get started. The next slide is going to show and cover what trauma is. This can be a hard topic to have with the teen. There might be things the teen might not want to share with you, but there also might be things that they do share with you that might be hard to hear. Just remember the tools that you were given earlier in the training to help you help your teen. When you do navigate the slides, be aware that there is embedded audio on the slides that will start automatically, so make sure that you and your teen are ready before moving on to the next slide.
What is trauma? An intense event that threatens or causes harm to our emotional and physical well-being. An emotional shock that has a deep effect on one's life for a long time. An event that is frightening, dangerous, or violent that poses a threat to our life or body.
Once the audio completes in the slide, you can pause for a discussion or questions, and then when you are both ready, move on to the next slide.
Examples of one-time traumatic events include divorce, moving homes or schools, death of a pet, your relative passing away, a friend moving away. Then there are some larger ones, such as tornadoes, hurricanes, sexual assault, physical assault, sudden death of a parent or caregiver, hospitalization, or even witnessing someone being assaulted.
Again, this can be a hard topic to cover. Be understanding and remember to be helpful within the role that you are taking. When you are both ready, move on to the next slide.
Examples of recurring traumatic events include physical or emotional abuse. Maybe your parents fight, maybe they hit each other. Sexual abuse, gang violence, bullying. Maybe you're constantly made fun of by your peers at school or even bullied by a family member.
You can pause for discussion, and then when you are both ready, move on to the next slides. And these next slides will cover the different ways that trauma can affect you.
Trauma can even affect us emotionally. You can experience things such as nervousness, being worried about your safety, agitated, withdrawn, sadness, scared of sleeping alone at night, temper tantrums, or even disassociated, which is your ability to cope with the trauma by withdrawing from the world. Trauma can be so powerful, it has the ability to affect us physically. It can cause stomach aches, headaches, nausea and vomiting, or nightmares and trouble sleeping. Trauma can affect us mentally. It can have us relive the event, see images such as thinking we see our abuser in the crowd, remembering every detail of what happened and what they did to us, and having the need to tell the story over and over again.
Now, the next two slides do cover PTSD. Your teen might have some questions, so go ahead and answer those if possible. And when you're finished with your discussion, move on.
Experiencing trauma may bring on what is called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. PTSD can cause the following symptoms without warning and for what seems to be no apparent reason. It causes intense fear, feelings of helplessness, feelings of being agitated and disorganized, trouble sleeping, trouble focusing, and a loss of appetite. PTSD can cause changes in your interactions with others. It can cause you to be more aggressive or more withdrawn. You can have regressive behaviors such as bedwetting, clinging, and sucking your thumb. You can feel emotionally numb, anxious, or depressed, and even have separation anxiety. If any of these sound familiar to you, you could be suffering from PTSD. However, there's no need to worry. Professionals can help you reclaim your sense of power and overcome your PTSD.
So this is the last slide in the Introduction to Trauma PowerPoint. We'll go ahead and go back, and then we'll go into coping with trauma. Make sure if your team has any questions to answer them, and then finish your discussion and move on to coping with trauma.
Coping with trauma. Helping yourself. Identify your triggers. Identify what makes you feel safe. Learn how to identify and manage emotions. Develop a positive view of yourself. Take control of your own life where you can.
The next two slides are going to go over triggers.
Triggers. Triggers are unique to each person and can be very personal. That means that what might trigger you might not trigger someone else. Triggers are activated through one or more of the 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. Sight. Someone can look like your abuser, or you may see an object that was used during the abuse. Sounds. Something that resembles sound the abuser made, such as whistling or their laugh, or words of abuse, such as put-downs and name-calling. Smell. Anything that resembles the smell of the abuser, such as perfume, cologne, alcohol, or tobacco. Something that resembles the smell of the location, such as firewood or food cooking. Touch. Anything that resembles the abuse endured prior to or after, such as someone standing too close or a certain type of touch. Taste. Anything that relates to the abuser prior to or after, such as certain foods, alcohol, and/or tobacco.
This is the point where you can pull out the trigger worksheet and you can go through that with the teen. It might open up a conversation. So go ahead and work through that. And then when you're both ready, you can work through to the next slide, which covers safety.
Safety. Identify who are the safe adults in your life. Maybe it's a parent, a teacher, a neighbor, a relative. Who or what provides you comfort when you feel scared or anxious? Maybe it's a pet, a blanket, a sweatshirt. Can you establish a routine for yourself to create consistency? This means getting ready in the morning, going to bed at the same time, reading books or telling stories, eating meals. Consistency helps us feel safe.
This is a good time to talk with the teen and see if they are able to identify the safe adults in their life. If they can mention 1 to 2, that's fantastic. If they are having a hard time, you can talk with them and help them to identify who that might be. Once that discussion is completed, go ahead and move on to the next slide. Positive self-view. What do you believe about you? Do you think kind thoughts about yourself, or are you unkind? Identify and challenge your negative beliefs about yourself, and ask, how are my own thoughts impacting the way I view myself? Maybe other people tell me negative things and I believe them, but these negative thoughts don't need to be your reality. How can you challenge a negative thought with a positive one? Identify what is a positive about yourself. If you can't find things on your own, ask a trusted loved one. Build positive relationships while avoiding negative ones when you can. Sometimes we surround ourselves with people who bring us down. If we aren't careful, negative relationships can start to skew our sense of reality and who we truly are. Give yourself grace. Have you made mistakes? Are you imperfect? You are not alone. Be understanding and learn to forgive yourself. You are separate from the mistakes you make. Be more assertive and learn to say no. Being strong and knowing your own boundaries can contribute to a positive self-view. You'll be proud of yourself for identifying your needs and standing up for those needs with others. Improve your physical health. With a healthy body comes a healthy mind. Take on challenges. Prove to yourself that you are strong and capable by doing difficult things. These challenges will help you to grow as a person, and with that growth comes a more positive view of yourself. So the next slide here is a video about self-talk. After you watch this with your teen, you can pause to talk about positive ways that they see themselves. Here we go.
Our thoughts, feelings, and behaviours continually affect each other, and it's easy to develop negative patterns where unhelpful thoughts lead to unhelpful feelings and actions. Sometimes this can become a vicious cycle. Many of us don't realise that we can influence this process and that this can improve our mental health. The best way to deal with these unhelpful thoughts is to recognise them, challenge them, and see if you can replace them. Some people call this the catch it, check it, change it approach. With practice, this can help us look at perceived problems from a different perspective. For example, you might be worried about an important task you have to do at work, convinced it will go wrong and everyone will think you're a failure. Rather than immediately accepting this thought and feeling even worse, take a moment to catch it and check it. Ask yourself whether there's good evidence for it, or if there are other explanations. Try thinking about what you would say to a friend who was thinking this way. Finally, see if you can change the thought for a more positive one. Maybe, I'm prepared, I've put a lot of work in, and I'm going to do my best. Sometimes you will be able to change the thought to a positive one, but don't worry when at other times you can't. There are no right or wrong answers. It's about learning to think more flexibly and be more in control. By catching the thought, checking it, and seeing if you can change it, with practice, you can help break the negative cycle.
All right. So after finishing the show or the video, you can pause for discussion, and then when you're both ready, you can move on to the next slide.
Control. The power of choices. This means that choosing is a right, an ability that you and only you have in your life. You have the choice on your actions and behaviors, whether or not you follow the rules and expectations, how you respond in a situation when you are upset and stressed, your goals and the effort you give to achieve them, who you are friends with, and most of all, your attitude.
So this is the last slide in the coping with trauma. You can fill out the how I respond to trauma with the teen and finish up any conversations that you might have. Now that we have worked through the intervention process, we move on to termination. This section will summarize what you have covered in the day's lesson and give you the opportunity to have any final thoughts or conversations. After this, you will complete the evaluation process.